Hello YouTube, it's Ryan here, the Hobbies of Man once again, and today we're going to be doing another original English light novel review. Today we're going to be looking at World Without God, Fallen Angels, I think is the full title. It's written by Trite Hexagon, which is a fun name. I really like their username, or their author name, I don't know, their nom de plume, whatever it's, you want to call it. And illustrated by NIAC, or NIAC, I don't know how to say it. Who does a really great job. The illustrations here are phenomenal. I really like them. And it's published by Moonquill. So they did send me this book for review. Just so you guys are aware. Now, in terms of the demographic, I'm not exactly sure. I don't know what to call this. I would say YA. It has a lot of YA characteristics that follow high school students, and it doesn't really delve into anything particularly difficult for teenagers to understand. So I would say that it's a YA type of book. And the genres here are slice of life, science fiction, paranormal, and I guess to an element of spoilers here, it's also kind of a game-lit story, a virtual reality type of story. So there you go. And of course it does not have an adaptation. But it might be interesting to see this adapted into an animated medium or something like that. I don't know. It'd be pretty difficult to do, but Moonquill has been trying to get into adapting their original works into other mediums. Like they have a webtoon for Lord of Goblins. If they manage to find people that were willing to work on animated projects, this one could be interesting to do in very small bursts of animation, right? So it would be pretty interesting to see that. And the premise is basically that there's this guy called Takeya, who is called Takun by his friends, and this girl Ayumi, which are these two characters right here, who are, in a very Haruhi Suzumiya type of way, hunting for angels, which are these light beings that are found around the world. While they're searching for these angels, they actually stumble across something that is significantly more horrifying, difficult to process than the existence of these angels, which they more or less agreed existed in the first place, right? So it's really hard to talk about this without really giving away anything, because there is a major situation that happened in the story that changes how you look at the story. And this major twist is also partially why I don't really care about this story. It is what it is. So let's get into the plot line, the characters, the world building, everything as usual. And then in my rating section, I'll talk about why this really doesn't work for me, even though there's nothing objectively wrong with it. So let's get into the review. So the plot line is a pretty slow start. It actually initially seems to be this kind of Haruhi Suzumiya type of story, right? There's this guy who is a pretty average person, and his best friend, or his childhood friend, is this girl with a very strong personality, and also this kind of insane drive to figure out the supernatural, right? So it's basically what it is. And even in the author's note, or the afterword, they mention how they wanted to make a story that crossed the melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, Heaven's Lost Property, and High School DxD. And we kind of see that throughout the story. The High School DxD aspect happens, and it's very small, but it is there. So, but more or less, the story starts with that slow slice of life beginning, and then it turns into this kind of big discovery, which is, finding angels, which is kind of what the story is about to begin with, which then leads into a twist, which then leads into this horrible loss, which then turns into a confrontation, which then becomes a bitter-sweet resolution. So I kind of told you the plot points without telling you exactly what happens, and I hope that manages to be enough to entice you without actually ruining anything for you. So hopefully that works. It's really hard to talk about this and give like a proper explanation about what happens in the story without really talking about like these specific plot points, because if I did that, it would basically ruin the enjoyment that you get out of this discovery, right? So they would not help them, Moonquill sell more books if I told you exactly what happens, right? So for the sake of the review, I'm just gonna leave it at that. In terms of characters, we have Takeya, who is the male main character. Ayumi, who technically I guess is the actual main character of the story, but like everything is through Takeya's eyes. So it's kind of in the same vein as like Lucy and Natsu. Lucy is technically the main character. She's actually the one chronicling the story, but because she's focused on Natsu, Natsu ends up being the main character because we see it from her perspective, right? Like, I think a lot of people don't really pick up on this in, fairy tale, but the story is her writing it out to like her mom, right? And her mom is dead, but she like writes it out in her diary as something that she's going to tell her mom. And so we see the story from Lucy's perspective about Natsu, and that's why Natsu looks like the main character. So the point is that it's a very similar story in that sense. Takeya is the main character, but we get to see the world through his eyes, and because he is so focused on Ayumi, we get to see Ayumi be like the important character of the story, if that makes sense. There's also two other characters that show up, which are Shina, who is one of these characters aligned with the supernatural, and Futaba, who happens to be a classmate of Takeya and Ayumi's, who also ends up being aligned with the supernatural element of the story. So those four characters seem to have a really interesting dynamic throughout the story, mostly in the second half of the story, that I find really interesting. Shina is actually the most interesting character. She's introduced in a very interesting way, and then we get this revelation about her later on, which I think is funny. And Futaba is more or less the same. She's introduced one way, it turns out she's a different way, and that difference is really, really interesting, but I don't really care too much about any of these characters. I think the most interesting one is probably Ayumi, but that's just because I really like the gun-ho, like, girl that knows what she's doing and believes in what she's doing, even though everyone else thinks is kind of insane, right? So I really like that type of character archetype, although this one is more like a Haruhi clone or a Haruhi light type of character, and I actually really think that works for their favor, because the one time I read Haruhi Suzumiya, I read the manga, and I didn't really like Haruhi Suzumiya. She was really like in your face to like an annoying degree, and I think that Ayumi manages to tone down that a little bit and also make it a little bit more cute than Haruhi Suzumiya. So I quite like Ayumi as a character. In terms of world building, we have these hidden paranormal elements. We have these angels. We have the paranormal stuff in general, which I can't really say too much about. And then we have this element that is similar to The Matrix or Inception or any of these like types of like virtual world type of situations. And again, I'm not going to explain what I really mean because it's going to spoil something. So, it is what it is. That's really all I can really say. Most of it happens in the real world in Japan in a kind of pretty standard slice of life thing with these small elements of the supernatural built in, which is this stuff. And then the Matrix thing is the major plot development of the end of the story. In terms of the artwork, it's great. Since this is not a manga and I'm not going to have like Shueisha on my ass, I can definitely show you some images. I think this looks really good. Let me show you a different one. Here you go. And let me show you one more. This is the Shina character. So there you go. Those are some bits of the artwork. I think it's really, really well done. I really wish there was a few color pages in this story. I think would have gone a long way to make it even more exciting for me as a collector. There really isn't much to do in terms of the writing to make it more exciting for me because, well, we'll get to it. But it is what it is. I really like the artwork. I think NIAC or NIAC did a really good job with the artwork. And I would actually really like to see them be someone that Moonquill talks to and maintains in their circle of creatives, because their artwork is really good and it would work really well for a lot of these other slice of life type series. So I think that's really, really good. So let's talk about fan service really quick. And basically, there is none, or at least I can't remember anything specific about fan service. There's some elements of like mentioning, this girl has boobs or this or that, stuff like that really isn't fan service. But in a Japanese manga or something, it would be followed with like perverted smiling or, some funky, tune or something like that. Stuff that like isn't really actually sexual content, but has that kind of slight undertone of it to keep like the shonen readers interested. That kind of stuff is prevalent here. It happens once or twice in the story, so it is what it is. There's no actual fan service of any kind, though. There's no bath scenes, there's no peeking, there's nothing like that. So it's a pretty clean story in that sense. I think it's something that you can pick up if you're afraid or against fan service heavy things. So yeah, in terms of a rating, it's a 3 out of 5. And if you guys know me, if you guys see my videos, you'll know that basically means I'm never going to read this story again. And this is more or less true. I will probably not read this story again unless Trite Hexagon comes out with a new volume or does another story and I like that story more and want to come back to his other works, which might happen, might not. It really depends on Trite Hexagon and Moonquill. But out of my own free will, I won't read this book again, because the first read through was satisfying enough. I never felt bored, but I didn't really feel excited to read this book at all, which is why it took me like a year to read this after I got it. And it's just because the story that is being told, the plot line, the major development, isn't really something that interests me all too much. I don't like movies like The Matrix. Inception is interesting, but I really just like the visuals. I don't really care too much about the actual plot line of the story. Things like Surrogates, which is an old action movie, or Total Recall, I don't really care about these types of stories, which are kind of similar to what happens in this one. And I don't really like them, and so a story that focuses on that is not going to be appealing to me. So that's why it's a 3 out of 5 and something that I won't read again. It's just because even though objectively Trite Hexagon did a great job of writing this, it doesn't manage to capture my love and attention because it's not something I'm particularly interested in. If this was like, slightly different and there was like a demon element or an urban fantasy element beyond just generic paranormal stuff, I would have probably liked it more. But because it goes into this like kind of development into, what are memories and what is humanity and all of these kind of more like robust themes through this exploration of this virtual world thing that is kind of similar to The Matrix or Inception, it kind of loses my interest. And especially because it happens around 100 pages in, and I'm already not really invested in the story because I don't really care too much about the characters halfway through the story because they're just doing slice of life, really basic things. So it really is, it's just, the deck was stacked against me liking the story, and so it just happens that I don't really care for it. However, because I had nothing negative to say about the writing style or about the character developments or anything like that, it's still a 3 out of 5. It's an average book. It's one that I'm not going to pick up again, but it's one that I'm happy to put in my library, and I'm really happy that I read. So there you go. It is what it is. I think that if you're interested in those themes or those kind of things like that, you'll probably enjoy it. If you like the really shitty, vaguely Christian mythology that is available to read in something like Devil's a Part-Timer or, High School DxD, you'll probably like the elements that are available here. If you like Haruhi Suzumiya or Cultic 9 or things like that, you'll probably like this as well. So, be aware of that. But I personally just didn't find it appealing, and that's really all that is. There's nothing wrong with the writing. It's actually really well done. There's like no errors whatsoever. I couldn't find a single typo or anything like that, which is great. I have seen quite a few in my other Moonquill books, so I quite like that. I think Moonquill is definitely upping their game, and I think that Trite Hexagon did a great job with the story. It's just sadly one that doesn't interest me personally. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this story and about this book. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please do like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought, and thank you guys very much for watching. Please make sure to go follow Moonquill on social media and also buy their books if you guys are interested in it. I'll link you guys to their website so you guys can know what's being made by them. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and see you guys later.